NETMOD 121 Session 2. Thank you for joining. I'm Kent Watson, Chair, and Lou, my co-chair, is here as well as our Secretary, James Cumming. Um, and as always, we try to bring people to join Meet Echo on their phones. It's necessary to do that, so a blue sheet tracking can occur, and also if you can join the queue and exit the queue. IETF has a note well. We've been advised to try to not to interpret the legal meaning of the note well, but be advised that there is a note well. Sort of the takeaway, the key takeaway point is anything you say during the meeting is considered an IETF contribution. We do have conduct guidelines. So IETF has asked all chairs to remind the working groups of the need for appropriate behavior. This is described more in BCP 54, but in summary, the IETF participants extend respect and courtesy to the colleagues at all times. IETF participants have impersonal discussions. IETF participants devise solutions for the global internet that meet the needs of diverse technical and operational environments. And lastly, 4, individuals are prepared to contribute to the ongoing work of the group. Some meeting tips. For in-person participants, as I mentioned, make sure you sign into Meet Echo. Is again used for joining the queue. Do join the queue and queue up for if you have comments. Let's see, for remote participants, make sure your audio and video are off unless you're chairing or presenting. So for Jan, when you present, you can present your video if you like and turn on your audio. Use of a headset is strongly recommended for remote participants. Some administrative notes, again, Meet Echo. There's also a chat jabber, and there's a note-taking tool. If you look to the chat window, you'll see a URL to the note-taking tool. Please help us with minute taking. There's an online agenda and slides at the URL that's listed, and of course, the data tracker entry for the NETMOD working group. Okay, so moving on to today's agenda, there's a special focus on templates. First, there'll be, well, right now we're halfway through the session intro, but there's about 5 slides coming up that will set the tempo for what are templates and what we're doing here. And then we have 4 10-minute presentations, different templating ideas, and then 10 minutes of discussion. Hopefully, we'll see what we get out of it. So how do we get here? Templates are hinted at but not defined in NMDA, RFC 8342. For instance, I mean, there's a few different places if you search for the word template in the document, but this one seemed the most evident. So some implementations have proprietary mechanisms that allow clients to define configuration templates in running. These templates are expanded automatically by the system, and the resulting configuration is applied internally. So this idea is coming up again now because of an incoming liaison that indicates that templates are needed to more concisely define configuration and as well as to improve scalability. This is ITU liaison, and I recall hearing Mahesh just mention in the Ivy working group that ITU says if you don't respond, then like no response is considered consent. So I recall this actually came up last time. So ITF 120, we responded pretty strongly on list, but it's been quiet since then. So I don't know if they're considering this to be a no response or response, but we are still under the pretense that we're trying to respond to this liaison. Okay, so what are templates? Templates enable common configuration to be factored out. They support dry, right? Don't repeat yourself. This is a common term in programming where if you don't copy paste code, you instead factor it out into a function and then refer to that function throughout your code. So same idea, but now we're talking about configuration data. So you have 1,000 interfaces and similar configuration is applied to most of them. So if you can define that configuration once and then refer to it many times, that's dry, right? Also, templates reduce cognitive overhead and over-the-wire data, as well as memory consumption, potentially. Certain implementations, if they implement a certain way, they can reduce the in-memory consumption on the server. What templates are not? Despite these presentations being labeled as Yang template ideas, templates do not affect the Yang language itself. So nowhere in this would we expect there to be an update to 7950, for instance. Like there's not a new Yang statement or anything like that that would necessarily be defined to support this. And although I do, as a precursor, if hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at some of the presentations, I did see some metadata annotations, which are ripe for potential inclusion in a future version of Yang. The idea is that templates can work with any Yang data model, even if that data model has been augmented or deviated, right? So any snippet of configuration that the server has, it should be able to be templatized. That would be the ideal goal. And I don't know why that's in the blue purple box that says whether or not, but that's what we want them to be. Okay, next slide. Should templates be standardized, right? I mean, here's probably one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves. Templates could have been standardized before now. I mean, when NMDA was published, it was already being discussed, but we never really pursued it. Why not? Was it just that the working group was too busy? Is the issue not important? Are we concerned that templates require clients and servers to opt into using NMDA and there's not enough uptake to NMDA currently to support it? Or it could be that that there's concern that the client-side tooling is missing. So if you it's easy enough for the server to expand templates on server, but if you're asking the clients to expand, to be able to do off-box validation, that might be a concern if the tooling's missing. A potential, one of the other concerns is that many vendors have existing solutions. If we were to publish a standard solution, how would they gracefully migrate to it over time? And so one idea is that we could somehow annotate the templates as to which solution that they're using. So if the device is, or the server is currently implementing the existing templating mechanism, those templates could be tagged as using the existing mechanism, and then we publish a new mechanism, and so other templates simultaneously, right? So inside a single running data store, it could be some templates are of the existing and then some templates of the new. And over time, right? So currently the server only supports the existing, and so 100% of all the templates are using that version. And maybe a decade from now, everyone would have transitioned over to using the standard version, and then that's how we could gracefully migrate. So that's one of the ideas. What's the purpose of the next hour? We need to decide if this is an important topic, something the working group should pursue. Also, we'd like to compare and contrast those existing solutions. There's 4 ideas coming up. I know that these aren't all the ideas. There's yet others that are not being presented today from other implementations. Some of the considerations that we should keep in mind are these ideas solving the same problem. So that we have 4 ideas, or let's compare and contrast them. Is the goal to address the size of the wire or internally to? So, I mean, there was the liaison spoke to over the wire consumption, but also I think there was in-memory consumption. Is the goal to reduce human cognitive overload? So many would claim that if the device is being managed by an orchestrator or a controller, then it's not important. I mean, for the configuration on the box to be simplified for understanding. But what happens if you receive a call 4 in the morning and you have to log into the device? It would be nice if that device is on the device itself. If the configuration was templatized for easier understanding. And then lastly, should the template solution be independent of data models? I mentioned before that would be an ideal, that any data model, whether or not it's deviated or augmented, could be templatized. And if it's not independent of data models, and one of the reasons for not doing that, oh my God, there's a bug flying around, would be because you could, for validation purposes, right? If you had uh, like model specific templates like BGP, you have a BGP template, and then if it was put into running, you could actually validate running. So running alone could be validated. And that would be a reason for why to have not templates be not independent of data models. Okay, so that's it for this introduction and right on time. I'll stop these slides. And we have our first presenter. You want to use the clicker.
Thanks, Kent, for the this one, I guess. Okay, for this nice introduction that says me some talk. I'm Robert Pesci from Nokia, and together with two of my colleagues, we have submitted this draft proposing template methods. This template, I will go straight to the core. This template method is especially adapted to devices, large devices that contain many identical subsystems in gray dark here on the screen that require more or less the same configuration, more or less. You have some little variation, that's the green, red, or blue differences in the configuration, but grosso modo is the same configuration that you have to replicate hundreds of times, 200 of times, maybe in the device. So what we look here with this proposal is to have something that is improving the scalability of the model and which is deployable now with existing Yang 1.1 and also existing NetConf, existing off-the-shelf tools. So no fancy stuff, something that you can deploy now because the industry needs it now. So how does it work without template with such a device? Well, you have the device manager, the client that has to build configuration for each of these subsystems. Then it has to push that to configure the device, with a copy config, for instance. It's a lot of data, hundreds and hundreds of more or less the same data that you have to pass. So that's a long time to configure. And it takes also a large memory footprint on the device. And when the device is an embedded system, it's an issue, actually. Okay, so from the Yang perspective, what you have is a list of instances, one instance being one of the subsystems in your device. So you have here three subsystems. So you have a list of 3 entries that you have to configure. Okay, so I will jump to the template solution. So what we are proposing is the following. So first, the client prepares a configuration of a template. A template is kind of a typical subsystem configuration. Then the client prepares also the list of the actual instances, one instance per subsystem that you have to configure. But these instances are kind of empty. They do not contain any configuration, but they contain a reference to the template. That means that actually the data node value will be copied from the template for each of these instances. You see some small variation. It's still possible to configure per instance some fine tunings. If you want the red or the green or the blue that differs from a template, you can do that. But you see already that the size of the memory in the running data store is very small compared to the previous slide. So that takes less time to download, to push to the device. Also less memory footprint in the device. What does the device, when it receives this configuration? It will understand that for each instance, it has to take a copy of the templates and merge it with a few data nodes, red, green, or red, depending on the instance, in order to create internally what has to be dumped, that has to be pushed to each of the subsystem. From a Yang tree point of view, what you have is still the instance data model like before, but this one will be almost empty in terms of configuration. You have many of these instances, again, think of 200s, for instance, 300s. And you have also templates, a few templates, sort of bronze, silver, or golden templates, but very few of them. And the templates have, of course, the same data model as the instance they have to represent. Okay, so maybe getting back here. So the same data nodes, right? We still want to draw the attention that for the defaults in the mandatory statement, we have a point of attention here. If you have data nodes that have a default and mandatory statement, you have to take care that in the instance they are not applied. Why? Because if you have a default statement, it will override what's coming from the template. And it will do that silently. Because if you do not configure something, it is as if you have configured the default value. And the idea is that what you configure per instance will overrule what's coming from the template. So that's here something to keep in mind. The mandatory, what is the issue? Well, mandatory means that you had to configure it in the template. And now if you have a mandatory statement also in the instance, you have to repeat it for nothing because it's already in the template. So it reduces the efficiency of the mechanism, the template mechanism to have mandatories. So basically, this is the same data node for the instance and the template, but mandatory statements and default statements should not be applied to the instances. An easy way to do that is when the data nodes are in groupings, then you can define the groupings without any mandatory and default statements. You can use these groupings as is for the instance, and for the template, you can refine the groupings, adding the mandatory and the defaults wherever you want to have them. Okay, so that's it. So I stress again, what we want to have is existing Yang 1.1 support, no change in off-the-shelf tool, something that you can deploy today. It's a pragmatic approach, and that's helped the scalability. And oh Jesus, I'm nice on the time. Thank you.
Any comments or questions or clarifications on the draft only? As we have the presentations, let's not try to do the comparisons until the end. But any comments or questions about this draft?
So does your presentation differ from the draft in any way?
No, that reflects what's in the draft, yes.
Okay, so that's available for anyone to go look at, to go read, to, so thank you. Thank you for, if I'm not, yeah, thank you for giving us a draft that we can.
Thank you.
No,
Wait.
Stay.
Question? Yes.
Rob Wilson, thanks for coming and presenting. And so just to understand the solution, am I right in thinking you modify the models to follow this technique? So you modify existing models, or effectively to apply this templating technique, the models would have to follow this new structure. Is that correct?
Okay, so here is go back here. Yeah, here you see it's a very general technique that I present here. So you have a list of instances and some data model for the instances. So for instance, you have a list A and a list B. Could be something like an interface for list A, list of interfaces for each subsystem, and a list of, for instance, hardware component for list B, for instance. I don't go into more details than that in the method. That's just to explain how to have a list of instances, how you can apply a template on the list of instances. Now, what you bring is interesting because in the real life, and I think that is something in the first slide. Future, what we will show, maybe in another draft, is what to do when we want to reuse data nodes that are defined in current standards, interface Yang or hardware Yang. How can we have these data nodes being used in template and instances like I've explained? 10 minutes is too short to explain this, but we are thinking still as a spoiler, we are thinking to have these data nodes into groupings. And the groupings, we could use them when we define the list of instances here. Yeah, when we define the list of instances, the data nodes list A, they could be just a use statement of a grouping. And so it will be the same data nodes as the original standard, but they would be now placed into the tree of the list of these subsystems.
And then so there'd be various parts of the schema tree that you'd apply this modeling technique to, and rather than being generic across the whole tree, there'd be particular places.
I'm sorry, I missed your point.
So would you apply this generically through the tree, like this Yang schema tree, or there are particular places where you'd use this templating technique? As in, could you do it anywhere and everywhere in the tree, or are there particular places where you do IETF interfaces and you put this templating technique for that?
This template technique is actually very powerful. Again, for this draft, we took a simple case, which is easy to explain. Again, 10 minutes is not much, but we have a generalization of this one when we want to do, like you say, for instance, part of the tree. You could apply also templates to part of the trees.
Okay, so my last comment is I worry about memory here, because I think that you might greatly increase the size of the schema on the device, and the increase in the size of the schema would easily outweigh the benefits you'd get in terms of less data.
Where would you see this memory being spoiled, actually?
If you've got the schema like the list here, that if you took away this, your schema would just be like the data list A, list B. Here you've got the schema both under the template and the instance, and hence your schema here is twice as big as it would be outside.
Okay, the scheme, yes, okay, but not the data itself. And the problem is the data configuration.
Well, actually, we'd then expand the data anyway. So so you'd end up paying more for our devices. You'd end up paying more memory. But I see there's other people in the queue as well. So
Yeah, we're almost out of time. So Oscar, next in queue.
Hi, two questions. One is you need to have the whole copy of the data model in the template, the whole, okay. And perfect. And the second one, what happens if the template changes after that?
Good point. That's a good point. The idea is that this is also very interesting to, it helps management, because when you change a template, then you can imagine that all instances originating from this template will be automatically updated. And also, if you see how we do that, we have a leaf ref to the template in the instance. You could change the leaf ref en cours de route, for instance, if you want to upgrade a user from a silver instance configuration to a gold instance configuration, you could, as an operator, change the reference from the silver to gold. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
We're out of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
All right. So, Chovan is not here, due to, time difference, cannot make it. So I will present on his behalf, on her behalf. And so motivation and goal, and, the concept template and profile has widely, adopted and endorsed by many standard work in many different SDO, such as IETF, BBF, and the use of configuration template has already been seen as best practice in the real world. So we here give several examples. In IETF, we already discussed NMD architecture. This really allow client to define the configuration template in the running, and also allow the system to do the expansion for the template automatically. And this has been already be well documented in the NMD architecture, but it doesn't provide detail how this young template format can be look like. The second bullet you will see, many IETF young data model worker define the profile list, like a L3SM as an example, L3SM, L2SM, we already defined like a QS profile and the encryption profile. So we expect it can be referenced by some other young data model. And also another example is L3NM, L2NM. In this two network level model, we only define the profile identifier. So this also can be referenced by some other model or some data node within the same model. So I talked with Matt, actually he reminded me, and attachment circuit also, they do the similar things. Actually, the profile, we define the profile list, which can be referenced. And recently we received this kind of liaison from BBF, target to the young scalability. So the base, I think the core idea is really, you can, use of the ONU young template combined with, ONU young profile. So that's motivate us to, propose this standard young template. Really, motivation is don't change the existing young data model. We don't want to republish the existing young data model. That's the main motivation we want to highlight. And the solution overview, and I will, go through the template definition, how we apply this template, and how we manage the template. Mostly we will do the override, and we already discussed one of these open issues, how we change the template, modify the template. And the last, I will discuss how we can interact with NMD architecture. So let's take a look at model architecture for this template data model. You will see this define the template list. You really walk through every template that you can have. It uses ID template ID to identify each template, and also it allows this template can be kind of inherited or and referenced by the parent level template or some other template. And the most important is that we actually define the one node is content in the any data type actually. So we gave the one example. This allow you to insert some instance data in this template. And for example, in the right you will see actually for this template we call the interface type MTU, and we insert interface configuration data with type MTU and description. These three instance value. And so these usually can be created and usually put it into the running directly, but if it has not been used, or it has not been live referenced, so this means it doesn't need to be validated, still in the running. And so how do you apply this template actually? And we can apply this, we already defined this interface type menu template. So we can apply to the interface, Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1, and you will see we introduce one metadata annotation we call the statement extend. And this really can allow you to hook this this annotation data with this each interface. And so we give the example, in the right, you will see it's kind of expanded template actually. And so we can make the conversion template that we define, for example, type M2, and description can be merged together with explicit provider conversion. We have interface Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1. So, but we give one rule is we think explicit provider conversion like Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1 in the right figure will be take precedence actually. So this the rule we said actually. We could have another example. For example, the config template can be inherited or referenced by another template. We don't give the example, but yeah. So and so how we can manage this template? We allow this overriding like a protocol operation. Actually, this allow a template can be override by other template or conversion data explicit provided by the client. So two protocol operation which can support modification and delete. For the modification, we already in the previous slide we gave the example. You have conversion template can be merged together with explicit provider conversion. And for deletion, actually, we need to define a new metadata annotation we call the operation tag. We can set the value, as a delete. For example, in the previous example, we have MTU description. If we really want to delete this description instance data, you can use this apply to the, the Ethernet, the specific interface. So you can delete this description associated with this interface. So for in addition, we can support order by user. This only apply to the list and leaf list, and we still can use the the operation tag we already defined, and this actually should be in the young template data model. You define this kind of metadata, so you can set a different value. With currently we support 4 different values. We allow position first, position last, position before, and a position after. And compare with position first and the last, actually, for the position before, you should have a reference entry, so you can put the attached entry after or before this reference entry. So this is the key difference. And last, you need to interact with AMD data store. Actually, so we define this young template in the either in the running or in the system. So it really depends on whether it is provided by the operator or provided by the device. If provided by the operator, you can use edit config protocol operation to really define this template and put it into the running. And if it can be provided by the device, that means you actually can use the system data store to store this kind of young template. And when it get created, actually we can look up the the young template conversion template data. You can return this unexpanded data from the running, and just we said here. And if you move from running to the intended, that means you should do this template expansion. After that, you can do the validation. And if this template conversion data get used or referenced, it will be moved to the operational, and it will be present in the operational. So that's all from my side.
All right, I see a couple in the queue. Rob Wilton.
Thanks, Jen. So quick question. On the last line, you said template definition may not be present operational if it's not used. If the template was being used, would the unexpanded template appear in operational as well? Or, oh, sorry, appear in intended, or does it not appear the unexpanded version?
We think, you know, when template getting expanded, we think, yeah, that's a good question. Actually, we currently think just the, you know, expanded template will be, you know, present in the operational, but the unexpanded, we haven't, you know, specified any, we didn't add this kind of restriction. So you think it's useful to have also
No, I'm not making any judgment. I'm just asking a question, clarifying questions.
If you
we
go
try
back,
to make it NMD compliant. Yeah.
if you go back to your previous slide, you had a left, right. Keep going. Yep. Yeah. So on the left-hand side is running, on the right-hand side is intended.
Yeah.
Next, Robert.
Yeah, yes. Quick question. This solution seems quite similar to what I've presented, except for the way you refer to
Sorry,
the
we're not
template.
doing comparisons at this point.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to know this, you need to have standardization activity for this new metadata. Is that correct understanding?
Yeah, we already have RFC 7952, so we can reuse it actually. So we define the young template, young data model, so we can, you know, use you know, metadata annotation. This is already specified in another RFC, so we can use it to define this metadata annotation.
Question: have you thought about?
No, I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you, Chen.
We're going to have open discussion at the end. We just want to be fair to everyone who's presenting. So, Rob,
Yeah.
and you can either use your phone or the clicker, your choice.
That's all right. Hello, everyone. This is the third template proposal, and I apologize to the working group that I haven't had time to write this up into a draft. So just to give an overview of the proposal, there's two aspects to it. First is defining a template. So a template can be defined for any fragment of the data model, and the templates are stored in the configuration data store along with the rest of the config. And a template can use regular expressions to restrict which particular instances the template can be applied to. And then the other aspect of the proposal is how the template gets applied. And in this case, the template is applied by specifying attributes on particular instances in the data store where you want the template to take effect. And also, there's this kind of cascading effect, which will be clearer when I give an example where you can apply a template further up in the data store, and then it will apply to all child instances. So this is the model for defining a template. There's a top-level list of templates where each template has a name and then a container where the fragment of data nodes can be put. So to give an example of that, this template is a template to set the MTU on physical interfaces. So here we've given it the name set physical MTU, and then that config container is where we're going to put this fragment of data nodes starting from the root, which says which data nodes we want to be instantiated when the template is applied. So filling that in, so I'm going to use interfaces as a sort of running example here, but this proposal applies to any bit of the data model. So here, if you look at the list key, that's the name leaf, there's this regular expression which restricts which particular instances in the list this template can be applied to. So gigabit Ethernet .star means that this template can be applied to any gigabit Ethernet interface, but not any other interface type. And if you wanted to apply this to any instance in the list, you could just write .star. And then looking at the MTU leaf, that's the further down, that's the leaf that will be set on the particular list instances when the template is applied. But I want to reiterate that defining a template like this, it doesn't actually take effect anywhere. So even though there's that regular expression, all that's doing is restricting which instances you could apply it to. And when I say regular expression here, I mean, we don't want to go crazy. This is just supposed to be kind of a simple way of filtering and restricting if the user wants to do that. So then with that template in the back of our mind, I've got a few examples of how it could be applied. So with all of these slides at the top of the slide, that's the configuration data store that the user is manipulating. And then at the bottom of the slide is the effective configuration after the template expansion has occurred. So in this first example, I've got 2 gigabit Ethernet interfaces, but I'm only applying the template to one of those list entries. And so, as you would expect, that MTU leaf only gets instantiated on the particular list entry. That's all very straightforward. I mentioned earlier this sort of cascading behavior. So if instead we put that apply templates attribute on a parent node, then it will be applied to all of the instances in the data store that match that regular expression. So here the MTU leaf is being applied to both. Continuing this a bit further, and apologies for the formatting, if instead one of those interfaces is a different kind of interface and doesn't match that regular expression in the template, then even though we've applied it further up in the data store, that leaf doesn't take effect for that second interface. And that's shown by the red arrow on the slides. The final example is that a template that's been applied further up in the hierarchy can also be explicitly excluded using a second attribute. So here we're back to having 2 gigabit Ethernet interfaces, but on that second one on the top there, you can see that I've added this exclude attribute, which stops the template taking effect for that particular list entry. So just summarizing the proposal, templates are defined in the configuration data store. You can use regular expressions to filter which list instances a template could be applied to. And then you use this attribute at any point in the data hierarchy to apply the template, and you can also exclude it. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you for staying on time. I see Jason Stern in the queue.
Hey, Jason Stern. I think you might have answered this just right at the end, but the regex matching is purely just for list keys, right? That's the only place this regex concept applies.
Yes.
Thanks.
I'm up next. Clarifying question. Whatever. Clarifying question. If you are if you're using this metadata to say when to apply it, why do you need the regex key?
Because if you imagine, sorry, let me just find the right slide. Imagine this case where you've got like 100 interfaces and you want to apply the template to 99 of them.
All right, so you would do it in the parent and then you use the regex. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Quick one also, this metadata is also subjected for standardization, I understand?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions on this presentation?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got 3 minutes back for more discussion.
Jan?
Okay. All right, you should have slide control, Jan.
Yes, thank you. I see that. Very good. I'll move on. So this is not, I would call this a proposal for how templates should work. It's just a explanation of what we already have in the NSO client. It's an orchestrator or controller. And just to give you a very high level idea, you can have several NSOs organized, like, for example, a top NSO that is controlling several sub NSOs that are in turn controlling large numbers of devices in the network. And they can do so over a variety of protocols, but netconf, of course, is the king here. There are already in these devices very often different kind of templating or high level configuration interfaces that do similar things as we discussed, quite often similar to the design pattern that you saw from Nokia earlier. And that is working pretty well, I think. But also inside NSO, there are 3 different kind of template concepts, but these are now on the client side rather than on the server. I don't know if that matters too much. You could do the same things on the server probably too, but. The first template concept we have is something that we call device templates. And this being on the controller side, you can apply these templates to any part of the configuration for any device anywhere. And one of the things that you see when you are on the client side is that usually you want to apply this to multiple devices, but they are not exactly the same. They are not exactly the same version. Sometimes they're also different brands, even if they fulfill similar function in the network, or sometimes they are not even the same function. So one of the key features here is that you can apply these templates to devices of different brands and types and versions. So you can see here in this particular SNMP template on the right, you can see that it's applied. It has the same template with some variables that you can add on the command line, can be applied to a Cisco iOS device, XR device, and a Junos device. The second template concept that we have is something that we call compliance templates. They don't actually change the configuration of any device, but you can still have a template that describes the configuration. And again, it's in a sort of in a way that you can do it for multiple versions and brands and all that again. And it will tell you then if the configuration that is on the device matches the template or not. So if it's compliant basically or not. So that's another use case for templates. And then we use regular expressions for the values there, as you can see. And the third concept here is our service concept. It's actually maybe not really a templating thing. It's much more than that. A service can do much more than you would normally expect from the template. If you mention the word template, this does more than that. But I mentioned it here because it contains a templating mechanism inside. Most of the reason that you are creating a service, basically what you do is you create a high-level Yang model for whatever it is that you want to control on the devices. And that is a sort of macro, if you like. You have only the few important things on the high level, and then it's expanded down to a large bunch of things on the device level. And there's a lot of logic involved in that typically. We call these services applications that is doing the translation from this high level to the low level. But as part of that mechanism, we are using something, as you see on the right here, that we call service templates. And it's a quite fairly advanced templating language where you can describe how this, how you touch things on the devices, including loops and ifs and all sorts of things, logical expressions, XPath expressions, and all sorts of things that you can apply. And again, one of the points is that you can apply this to many different brands and types and versions of devices in the network. I said that this is a client-side thing, but of course, even though NSO is mostly looked upon as a client, it is also a server. So all of these templates and the content can also be manipulated over, for example, netconf on the other side of the device or the controller here. So even if I say that this is a client-side templating mechanisms, they are on the server as well. I think that was it for me.
All right, thank you, Jan. Any questions or comments, clarifying questions or comments on this presentation? Well, I have one. Can you go to the previous slide, please, Jan? Yeah, can you explain just a little bit more? You were talking about brands, and also there's a looping mechanism. I see the if question. Can you just explain that in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So in this templating language, you can use expressions. For example, use this dollar or something that's computed by some code. But you can also use if statement to see if this is a gigabit Ethernet interface, then apply these things. If it's some other kind of interface, do something else or don't do anything. And you can apply a certain piece of configuration here in a loop. So for example, to all interfaces or all these 5 interfaces or all the interfaces that are part of this service or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thanks, Jan.
Steve, stop sharing.
I will. Okay. You want-
Share.
Oh, I did. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry. Talk. This works.
Make it bigger font. Can you increase your font? Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. All right. Well, we let's turn off the timer or reset the timer. I can do it as well. Okay, so we're going to enter the discussion phase, and we have an extra 5 minutes for that, so a total of 15 minutes for this discussion phase. So the order of the questions, or I mean, it starts off by mentioning if it's an important problem for the working group to work on, and also to compare and contrast the existing solutions. So I think I just want to focus on those 2 bullet points first. And actually, even before stepping into this, I want to thank all the presenters for preparing. It was like kind of a is a special request to pull this together, and everyone pulled through. So thank you, everybody. Okay, is it important? So I'll just start it off by saying what I perceive is there's a lot of interest in implementing templates. We have several implementations. 4 were just now presented, 2 of them from the same company. And I'm aware of at least one of the other companies that presented today. Another part of the company has yet a different solution. So sometimes companies have more than one templating solution, even within their company. And so, what I'm thinking about is from an operator's perspective or from a management systems controller perspective, especially if it's multi-vendor, if you're trying to manage many different kinds of devices and each device has a different way of doing templates, this is not easy, right? It gets the complexity gets kind of explodes. So is that an important problem for us to solve? And does anyone have any question or comments about that? Okay, yeah, Robert, please.
Well, I think it's important because young models do not scale for large devices. That is what we have seen in the broadband forum where I'm also participating. When devices become very large, it's really consuming much memory. The footprint becomes very large. The time to manipulate this data becomes also prohibitive. And really, it's very inefficient when the device grows in size. So whatever can reduce the size of the running data store would help. And I think that's a strong motivation for templates. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Oscar. Thank you.
Hi, I think having templates to be expanded later into configuration, I think that's highly important. And up to now, as we mentioned, we have already solutions there that do not solve the same problem because they are doing different things. In some cases, as you see, they just expand, and in some other cases, later on one of the solutions, later on if you modify that template, you modify later the service. So that's a completely different thing. So for me, the topic is important, yes, but I would like to step back a little bit before the solutions and define what do we want. Okay, so do we want just a mechanism to expand, or do we want some mechanism to track what we have, or to have it and change it later on? So just a little bit step and agree between us what we need to do. Just that. Thank you.
Okay. It's just interpolating or reading between the lines of the first 2 comments. I want to ensure, like the question is it important for the working group to define a standard templating mechanism, right? So already it's possible for vendors to have their own, but should a standard one be defined?
And we're going to have a poll that's asked just that question in a few minutes. after we give a opportunity for people to speak at the mic.
Next in queue is Jan.
Right. So I heard this comment by Robert Pesky that large systems have trouble with this today. And of course, if you're not modeling it properly, you can get into trouble. But I would argue that there are many systems with extremely large configurations using templates in a good way that are not getting in trouble. So if you do the design and implementation properly, even the current Yang and all of the things that we have can solve these large system problems well. I want to mention two things that we should also look at when we look at these solutions. There are some solutions that are on the kind of fire and forget, where some are persistent. So I mean, if the template concept stays within the configuration or not. Sometimes in some of these solutions, you apply a template, but the system will not know that the template has been applied afterwards. I think that's an important distinction to remember when we are examining this. And the other thing is some of these solutions are sort of based on any data or key values, pairs and stuff like this, where you lose the type system and all of these concepts that we have in Yang in order to make sure that we understand what the data is and what's valid data. And that's also something worth noting when you're evaluating these things. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Robert Wilson.
Yeah, so I had a question. Just Jan, could you clarify, when you said lots of systems are using templates that don't run into problems, that sort of seemed to be the same as what Robert was saying. Were you meaning that you can also do this without using templates? Is that what you were asking?
No, I mean, there are already templates mechanisms out there in the field today that are solving this for large systems.
Okay, so it is
So
scalable. Fine.
if you're a careful designer, it works. But of
Okay.
course, if you didn't think through your modeling before you went live and fielded it, you can get into trouble for sure.
Okay, so back to a question Kenny asked, is this important? The answer is I don't know, because obviously the industry has survived without having to standardize this for a long period of time. I do think there's benefit of trying to see if we can come up with a standard solution. And if we can, get a collection, got consensus towards that, then it would be valuable to the industry. But if we tried for a bit and we failed, I think that would also be okay. We're saying, actually, no, we don't need to do it. But I have no objection in us trying to solve this.
Okay. Robert Pesky.
Yes, so Jan, Sten was very sure. The template is a solution to problems. So of course, when you have templates, you do not expect to have any problem anymore. The point was, without templates, you may have problem. Is that what you meant?
Sure, but templates exist already today without further need for anything.
Okay. Now maybe to answer the question, is that something we should standardize? All depends, my opinion, all depends how far you want to go. The solution I was proposing actually doesn't ask anything to standardization. It just uses the current Yang, current protocols, current tooling. So actually it's just sort of application node of Yang. You can do that today with Yang and that is not matter for standardization. The second proposal, as I understand it, is indeed interesting to standardize because it can be incorporated in toolings, but it's a more long-term approach versus ours is a short pragmatic term approach. So all depends how you want this solution being, when you want this solution to be deployed, my opinion.
Okay, Huawei. Actually, I would agree with Jan's previous point that the template has already been widely used in various configurations. So it is definitely important to have the template, but I need to clarify a little bit on the question here. What does it mean if we standardize a template? Because for a similar or even a same configuration functionalities, there could be multiple templates coexisting with each other. But if we standard only one or a few of that, does it mean that we don't allow the other implementations? That would be problematic.
So in my session introduction, I suggested there might be an ability to annotate which templating mechanism was used. So more than one could coexist simultaneously. Primarily, that was to get from a server, assuming it has an existing, get from the existing to a new. But it also is possible for the server to support maybe 2 or 3 or 4 different templating mechanisms. Obviously, the goal would be to standardize on one, but if there's a native templating solution and then there's like a BBF templating solution, and so you have to support immediately more than one, but then we migrate over to the final.
Let's take the last question. We only have a few more minutes.
That makes sense.
Thank you. The BBF liaison officer, Xian Song from ZTE. Actually, I think this work is very important for BBF, and this work is raised by BBF liaison. And I also find after this discussion, we found there are many interests in, resolving this question. So, and at BBF, actually, when we deploy, large scale ONU at the PON, we didn't find existing RFCs, existing young models can achieve or resolve the large scale questions. So if IETF can, discuss this question and find a resolution or make some standardization on this field, it will be very helpful.
Okay, great. Thank
Okay,
you
thank
for
you.
everyone's comments. Jason, we don't have time for yours. And we have a poll, and it overwhelmed, or
It's pretty clear.
yeah, it's pretty clear. Most people think it's important to for the working group to standardize a templating solution. So we don't have that much time. 4 minutes to talk about compare and contrast. I'll just kick it off. I saw
Just for the record, more than half of the people in the room physically and virtually think this is a good idea. More than half of the people in the room think that this is a good idea. And when I say room, I'm including virtual. Only one think it's not, and we'd really like to hear from that person on list if they want to know. So we're going to now talk about, we're going to move on to the next topic.
Yep. Compare contrast. I saw a lot of similarity, right? Most of the implementations had an idea of ability to define a template, a list of templates, and then some ability for the data tree to refer to the templates. Some of them had, how do you do the reference to the templates? Was it like a leaf ref or was it metadata? So there's a variation there. Some of the solutions had the ability for a template to refer to a template, so hierarchical templates. Some of the solutions had the ability to be more than one reference. So it's a list of templates that you're consuming, and presumably they're either in priority order or they're ordered at a list, an order by user type list order, but there's a precedence between them that you work out how the template. So I saw a lot of commonality and some differences between them. There were some unique call out distinctions, right? So for instance, I saw one solution had the ability to specify operations, like to delete a node from a template. You're using a template, but you want to delete a node from a template. That was a unique idea in one presentation there. Also, the ability to specify, like reorder, put an element to the beginning of a user order by user list or the end of an order by user list. That was unique. Other solutions had the idea of macros or regex expressions, right? So not all of them had that, but some of them did, and then yet one solution had almost a programming language, looping and variables. And so there's definitely some distinctions there as well. I see Robert's in the queue.
Rob Wills, yeah, continuing on from what Kent said, I think there's a striking difference in power between the approaches. So approaches 1 and 3 are effectively an additive approach where you're just adding nodes. Approach 2 also includes deletion and reordering, and approach 4 is general purpose. And as a genuine open rhetorical question, it does just the ability to add things kind of get you 80% of the way there, or do the users want more power than that?
I guess.
Yeah, I think one important distinction is, are we doing it by adding nodes to every model, or are we taking an approach that adds something to either an annotation or adds another capability rather and does not require modifying every model? I think that distinction is actually hugely important.
James.
Yeah, thanks. James Cumming. I noticed that, again, there was lots and lots of similarity between them. One of the key differences seemed to be whether or not the template was validatable. And if it isn't validatable, what should a system do when you apply it? And how does an operator know that it's been successfully applied or not successfully applied? That's a consideration I think we should look at in whatever we do going forward, so that we can clear that up. And probably the interesting question out of that is, should it be validatable?
Yep. I'd love to dig into it. There's a couple more comments, and I don't think there's time to do it, but it does remind me also, Joe Pesci's presentation had a couple items about defaults and mandatory, which also kind of dig into the validity of the result. And I wanted to discuss it, but there wasn't time right now to do it. Next is Deepak.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the same thing. I mean, all the proposals were almost similar, and it also has the same point of attention on the defaults and the mandatories. That's what I want to make. I mean, all the three proposals would have the same issue.
All right, thank you. And Jason.
I just want to echo some comments that it's going to be tricky given the different proposals and implementations out there. It may be something we consider as we're trying to pull together a common proposal. There's some flexibility built into it. Just one example I can think of is some implementations maybe may not support applying a template at every single node. So maybe that should be flexible in whatever we come up with, or maybe some implementations would, it's just something to keep in mind that we may need some shoulds and some musts in a mix here if we're going to try to reconcile a lot of different implementations, kind of come up with a common subset with leaving some flexibility for vendor implementations to not have to necessarily re-architect completely.
All right, thank you. So we are out of time. Clearly, there's a lot of interest in pursuing this idea. It would be excellent if we could bring some of the discussion to the list. We could consider having an interim on it, or perhaps another one of these, like a second session at 122, IETF 122. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Oh, sorry.
For anyone who has an idea on this, we really want to see drafts that cover the idea. So please bring those drafts. Please continue the discussion. If the volume of discussion is sufficient, we'll do what Kent said of doing an interim. If it's not, we'll talk about it again at the next meeting. Thank you all, and see you in Bangkok. It's okay. Good discussion, good contributions, really good.
Yeah, I liked it.
That was great.
So you decided to see what I do?